Yo, what is up guys? Grim here, and in today's video, we have a bit of bad news. And that bad news is that in the latest patch, in the patch notes, we have seen the almighty and our favorite build here on the channel, nerfed. We've seen Tornado Shot get the axe. Now, this nerf isn't too bad. A lot of people have been saying, is Tornado Shot dead? What are we going to do? Are we going to go for a new build? All of these kinds of things to me. So to begin with, we're going to go over the nerfs and we're going to discuss how bad they are. And then we're going to talk about the build and some possible alternatives that we might look at. And then we'll come to a conclusion. So to begin with, the nerf for Tornado Shot, what is it? The initial and most important one is that they have fixed a bug with Fork. So currently in the game, there is a bug with Tornado Shot apparently and Barrage that makes it when you shoot an arrow, or what arrows, each arrow that comes out of your bow and hits a target, when it would fork, which would cause an arrow that hits to split into two, those two arrows actually won't split off. They'll hit that target again. So if you can imagine it, it's like an arrow hitting, bang, it spawns two more projectiles, and those projectiles hit immediately, bang, so it would be doing 3 times damage. So this would explain a lot of how Tornado Shot players were absolutely annihilating Legion encounters, specifically in the domain of Timeless Conflict, and especially with Delve. If you guys didn't know, the deepest Delver was a like 20 energy shield, like 10 life Tornado Shot player who got to ridiculous depths. So that definitely does explain the high damage, and that is going away. Just to explain this a little bit further though, this actually doesn't nerf the net damage of Tornado Shot at all. It just nerfs the damage and upfront kind of like burst potential of the skill. It's interesting though, because our attacks now will actually fall correctly where they wouldn't otherwise. So your actual coverage around the map will be better for the most part, because those arrows won't be immediately consumed on the target that they hit. So you will get better and more spread out damage instead of kind of more concentrated damage on one target. So in terms of the actual single target damage on bosses, it will be lower by quite a significant margin, but it shouldn't be too bad because your clear will be a little bit better. So then the second nerf, the Tornado Shot helmet enchant has been nerfed from +2 secondary projectiles to +1 secondary projectile. So we go from 5 down to 4. Now, is this a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. It's actually hardly a nerf at all, and it's probably one of, in my opinion, the worst nerfs they could have done to the skill, because they're not actually addressing the damage capabilities of the skill really, outside of the bug. And all they're doing is really removing a chase item and a tiny little fraction of consistency from the actual spread and clear and like kind of map coverage of the skill. They're not nerfing the damage, they're not nerfing how it multiplies your damage with more and more projectiles, they're not nerfing the fact that auras apply to every single projectile that you gain. None of that's getting nerfed, and they're just nerfing the consistency. About the only issue I can see with Tornado Shot is that if you actually observe the skill, right now we're shooting in a star pattern because we have 5 projectiles. Without the helmet, you shoot in a triangle pattern, and then with the new helmet enchant, which will go up to 4, you'll be shooting in a square pattern. Now, is this a big deal? For the most part, I don't think it is a big deal, and you should still be able to hit everything consistently and fine, because you're hitting, obviously, northeast, east, west, all that kind of stuff like that. It's the corners of the square. So you're going to still be getting very good coverage with the helmet enchant, and I think you should still be good. I don't think you're going to notice any downgrade in DPS and any downgrade in kind of coverage at all. To prove this fact, we're going to do a few maps without a quiver on and also without a helmet on. Just to show you guys that this isn't a big deal. I actually ran like kind of like a few dozen maps like this, T16 in fact, and I would be actually happy to, well, let's say the nerfs was this. Tornado Shot could no longer fork and the helmet enchantment would be removed. I would still play Tornado Shot, and I would still say it's the best skill in the game, just purely for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. So let's do a few games and see how it feels. Sorry, a few maps and see how it feels. We'll start off with a white map, and then we'll jump into a T16 map just to show you that the damage really is still there. So this is without a quiver, and it's also without a helmet and any enchant. So significant nerf here. Obviously we do still have Headhunter, but every single build, clearing build will have Headhunter once you get to a certain point. We do have proximity shields in this map, so that is obviously going to affect things here, but you can still see that Tornado Shot is by far still probably, well, it is the best clearing skill in the game, even without a quiver, even without fork, even without a helmet enchant, like without all of that. So I would still play this without any of that. So to answer the question, is Tornado Shot going to be worse? No, especially for white maps. The only thing that's going to get nerfed is its burst damage potential on the initial hit of the shot. And to prove that, we'll just go into T16s here. This is going to simulate exactly how it will play in the new league. Well, it's actually going to make it look worse than it would in the new league. So in the new league, it's going to be better than what we're about to see. So we'll just go in here. We even have temp chains on us apparently. I don't have a curse immune flask on this character. And this is T16, so I wouldn't be too worried at all. If I had a quiver on and chain right now, I would be absolutely just one-shotting everything. Keep in mind I'm also wearing full movement speed gear on this character. This is my Legion character. So I don't think you guys have anything to be concerned about at all. We'll get to the boss here and you'll see that it dies basically just still instantly, even without exploiting the bug that we had before. So if we had chain right now, we'd be getting a lot more kind of chains, but that's a T16 boss, basically with no like insane damage gear or anything like that in the bin, and we don't have anything to be concerned about here. But I know that some of you may just want to change anyway, so we are going to discuss our other alternatives because they did receive a buff. And the question is now no longer is Tornado Shot nerfed, but are the other skills brought up to the same level as it? So we're going to take a look at those and we'll kind of answer that question, and we'll go into T16 maps to test these. So in terms of the actual skills themselves, we can kind of put this gear back on now because these skills do not exploit the forking bug apparently, according to GGG. Oh man, was that actually without... That was without GMP that we were running that. Whoops. So yeah, even if GMP didn't affect it, we'd be fine. So yeah, exactly. We're saying here that it doesn't really matter. So the 4 bow skills that we have to choose from generally are obviously Tornado Shot, but we're not talking about that one. We're talking about Ice Shot, we're talking about Split Arrow, and we're talking about Lightning Arrow. So these 3 skills did receive a buff, and we can check out those buffs real quick. Maybe we're not going to check them out here because this is like pretty crazy. I can't find them. So I know the buffs off by heart though. What are we looking at for these buffs? So in terms of Ice Shot and Lightning Arrow, the buffs that they received are about give or take 100 DPS of Elemental flat on each of them at level 20. So what does this mean? Basically it means that as you level the gem up, you will get around about like a half or like a third of an added cold or an added lightning gem for free. So is that a big deal? At endgame, it's actually not a very big deal, but early on, it is a massive deal. That's a lot of damage, and you may now want to consider starting off with Ice Shot or Lightning Arrow before you transition into Tornado Shot at the end. In terms of top end, I never think that these guys are going to be better than Tornado Shot for what they do. They're just not as competitive, and here's the reason why. When you shoot out a Tornado Shot, what you're actually noticing is that you have a full screen coverage. And this means that you can basically play through the map and you don't have to worry about aiming anywhere on your screen. It'll just kill everything on the screen without like question, and you don't have to worry. So in the maps that we'll show you now, I'll just jump in on which one should we do, Ice Shot to begin with. You'll notice that I actually have to do a lot more kind of cleanup, so to speak, and I have to put a lot more effort into aiming at the packs when I'm trying to kind of kill monsters. And this is a big deal. That's going to reduce your overall clear speed. It's going to reduce kind of like the strain on your hand when playing. And in general, it's not going to be as good for efficiency. Now, with all those things aside, maybe you want to play Ice Shot. What are some other factors that make it not as good? So as we discussed earlier, for every projectile you have, on Tornado Shot, you actually receive more and more and more damage. And this is actually not the case with Lightning Arrow or Ice Shot, and you can quite clearly see that it is significantly worse when you're playing it. And no amount of added damage will ever really make up for the fact that for every projectile you're adding, you're not gaining an increased multiplier of damage. So you can see here I'm really struggling with this rare, and that is because Tornado Shot effectively does do, you know, like 7 or 8 times the damage of Ice Shot, and 100 added flat cold or whatever DPS is not going to fix that. So they haven't addressed the main problem with Ice Shot and Lightning Arrow, and that is that there's no real good ways to scale it currently, unless you're thinking of like taking out greater multiple projectiles. But again, you should still be looking at using Tornado Shot in terms of damage for that kind of use case. So you can see here, it wasn't the worst, but it's definitely not the best, and you can see the boss is definitely worse, and we're using now the helmet and Rigwalds here, so, and GMP, which we weren't using in the last map, whoops. So it's definitely a lot worse, and we're not going to see any sort of benefit from using that buff in the next patch, except for the very start of the league, when you might want a little bit of a damage spike, and Tornado Shot isn't ready for you to use because you don't have the gear yet. The same will apply for Split Arrow and for Lightning Arrow, and until they nerf how Tornado Shot functions at its core, Tornado Shot's going to be king, no matter, even if they remove the ability for it to fork, even if it can't have a helmet enchant at all, even if it can't have, if it has a projectile cap, it's going to be the best, and they need to change it like a lot more for it to not be the best. So, answer to the question. Tornado Shot is still, in my opinion, the best clear speed skill in the game, hands down. And this hasn't even put a dent in it, not even close. It's still the best bow skill, and I think it's going to be a very, very competitive choice going into the Blight League, and you can expect that guide that I promised you guys coming up soon, within the next day. So that's going to be good, lots of videos coming, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed this little video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.